You're listening to Kayak Flyer with your host, Sean. This week we're brought to you by Tennessee Trailers, OutdoorAdventureTrailers.com, the best way to get your kayak to and from the water. Cutthroat Furled Leaders, the only leaders that I use. Cutthroat Furled Leaders are guaranteed to perform for whatever species of fish you're chasing. Check them out at cutthroatfurledleaders.com. Save 15% promo kayak. Stoneflynets.com, the very best in handcrafted and custom fishing nets made in the great state of Arkansas. Check out Stonefly Nets at stoneflynets.com. All right, gang, we told you we were going to have Kat back on the show, and she is back. Finished up last week. Man, we had so much still left to talk about, and you were so nice to make time. You're listening. Whoa, we didn't hit that button. You were so nice to actually make time to come back on again, so I really, really do appreciate you spending another hour with us.
Oh, well, thanks, Sean. I really appreciate it, too. I had a good time chatting with you last time, and I appreciate the flexibility. I had some surgery things going on, so I was feeling up to chatting, and so I appreciate it. I'm better now. So
we are always flexible here. We do the wildest things for a podcast that I've ever thought of. The show for next week will actually have chicken on the show. We've already recorded it.
I'm feeling I'm one step below a chicken right now.
It was a really pretty chicken. I'm going to say that. Okay, it had some really nice hackle. That's all I'm going to say though. But
okay, yeah, I see where we're going.
So next week we're going to have Grumpy Platypus. But man, it is so great to have you back. And of course, we got called out on social media by Chachi.
Yeah, Chachi.
Yeah. Chachi called us out on social media.
Bless his little heart.
He is so tiny. He is so tiny.
Yeah.
I'm
looking forward to maybe getting to fish with you guys and sometime next year, though. That would be on that Buffalo River thing. Sort of got me a little excited.
It's a great river.
About that.
It's a great river. It's a great river. Yeah, we're going to have to go in the spring. Man, we got a lot of rain. And everything around here got blown out this last week. Things are getting back to normal, but we had about 3 days of river closure around here because real quick, about 2 inches of rain came down, and off that watershed, it just blows those crystal clear, mountain rivers out. So
yeah, it was probably part of the storm that went through Utah because it was like horizontal snow. Like 80 or 90 mile an hour winds, and it was crazy. So
yeah, we had some bad tornadoes south and west of us, and
bad.
Then like 4 days later we had just a massive drop of rain in a short amount of time, and the National Park Service closed all the rivers down. So yeah, it was wild, but that's one thing that, and I hate to say it because I know floods are devastating, but floods really do help the rivers, when they change the way things are and they make a river a new adventure every time you go.
Yeah.
And it's just like a lake. I mean, lakes have new things that come in, and water tables rise and they lower. And I know Chachi and I talked about that. Nick Chavarria and I talked about that a lot whenever he was on.
Who's Chachi?
Yeah, everybody's like, what Chachi? And then Nick Chavarria, I guess he's with New Canoe Fishing, or he's going to be with New Canoe. Hopefully he'll be with New Canoe Fishing. Anyway, whenever he was fishing Lake Darnell, I think he said the water dropped like 2 feet from practice day to fishing day.
Yeah, that was really crazy time too, and it dropped in temperature. Like the last day of pre-fishing on the spot that I found, I was in. It was set like almost 70-degree water. It was really warm, and by the second day of the tournament, it was 53 degrees, and that was a big challenge, but.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we were talking about a little bit last time, but I really wanted to talk a lot about this time. When it comes to you're traveling, obviously you're traveling all over, and some of the tournaments are always on some of the same lakes. But what is it like as you move to these lakes and you move across, so you're in Wisconsin and then you're down south. And how does that change the pattern? And how does a professional fisher manage that? What are the tools you have in your toolbox?
Well, I would say I'm fairly unconventional because I know a lot of people do extensive map study and look at Google Earth and try and find all these hidden spots or whatever, how things change over time on different things. And I'm on the road so much and traveling and doing fishing so many different bodies of water. I can't, number one, it's a lot of time to do map study that I don't necessarily have because I'm traveling. And secondly, it all blurs together. It's like, okay, what map was I looking at? And
Yeah.
so that's great if you're going to do something like one a month, you go here, then maybe a month later you go here. But if you're doing 5 different tournaments and 5 consecutive weekends, I can't keep it all in my head. So I compartmentalize it a little bit, and that when I get to a new fishery, I try and just treat everything like a blank slate. I might watch some YouTube videos just to get an idea of some different things people have done, but I find like because I fish from a kayak, it isn't always conducive. Especially if it's a bass boat tournament, they might be fishing areas that maybe I just can't. I don't want to spend two
Hmm.
hours trying to get to it.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And
It's a
yeah.
lot of pedaling. So, um, for me, I approach everything sort of fresh and clean, and I don't like to have a lot of preconceived ideas about how something's supposed to fish a certain way. Um, because I'm just doing so much variety. I like I'll go to like an Airbnb. Usually get there like on a Monday night or so, and because my tournament might have ended Sunday or Saturday, and so I drive to the next one, and I get there about Monday night, and then I pull out my phone and I start looking for boat ramps, and I'll try and find places to go fish, and I just try and find things I think will fit for the weather conditions that are happening and what's going to happen at the end of the week according to the weather service, but it usually doesn't happen that way. And just go out there and try and solve the puzzle. And so I'll go out with like 8 or 9 different rods, um, and just start chucking lots of different things and trying shallow, trying deep, trying structured. I mean, just really seeing like what is it that they want? Where are they really tending to be? And try and use that sort of to narrow down and figure out that fishery and find not just like one area I want to fish. If I'm lucky, sometimes I find a few areas to fish, but if I can find at least one that gives me a chance to really focus on tournament day. So that's sort of my approach. I know a lot of people have very structured strategies. They do a lot of study. They have this very structured way of doing things, and the amount of tournaments I've done, I just haven't found that that's conducive for what I want. And I get in my own way if I have this idea of
Mhm.
this is how this is supposed to be. Um, Especially if you listen to anybody say like this is the way the fish cat how to catch fish here, because everybody has different ways to fish, Sean,
Oh, yeah.
and different techniques and different things they like to do. And it honestly doesn't do me any good to listen to how somebody else catches fish that fish is completely different from me. I mean, the fish, if you watch who wins, 3 different people will first, second, and third will all be up there, and they caught them on all completely different lures and completely different areas, doing completely different things. And so it's really about trying to solve the puzzle and play to your strengths and play with, uh, you know, things that you feel like you can capitalize on. It's not always the case. I mean, I've had a few tournaments where we were just mentioning Dardanelle with that. So Dardanelle, I had found one place, and it took me an hour plus of pedaling to get there. And when I got there I had the whole thing to myself the whole tournament. I didn't see another kayaker. I saw one bass boat once, and it was so shallow. They're like, "Is it getting any deeper up there?" I'm like, "Nope."
Nope.
I don't want. Just go away. Um, but I had actually. Um, this is gonna sound sort of funny, but in pre-fishing, I had gotten sort of frustrated, and the wind was blowing, and I was sort of floating around out there having a little prayer session with God, just like, what in the world am I doing out here? Oh my goodness. And I had my line hanging over the side, just sort of dragging as I was drifting. I wasn't even really fishing. I was just praying, really. And all of a sudden, a fish hit my line while I was just sitting there talking to God. And I grabbed my rod and I set the hook and pulled in this really nice bass. And I was like, okay, there's bass here. Like,
Yeah.
okay, how did this bass I'm in 2 feet of water and it's so I'm like, what am I gonna do to get the bass that are here? Because that's the first bass I've seen in 3 days. And um, so on tournament day, I just couldn't get them. And I saw some bass going sort of swish at the top of the water, like after something. I don't know what. And I was like, I'm gonna try a frog. And
Oh.
I had never I hadn't really frog fished successfully. I had caught one bass on a frog in a farm pond in Nebraska once.
Mm. Oh,
That
yeah.
was it. Okay. And so I had zero confidence in it. And so I threw this frog out and it was, a cold front and wind was blowing and I just like finesse fished a frog really slow on top and I got a big limit doing that. And I was just winging it. I didn't know how to frog fish. I'm just like, I watch them take it real, they just gently take my frog. They wouldn't slam it or anything. And I'd wait a little bit, set the hook. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever, And, and, I even caught one in like the last 5 minutes of day one. I had like I'd lost a few frogging because I didn't know what I was doing and I threw one out I saw a fish swirl and I threw it out to the side, like the worst position you could ever throw it. And I've got like 5 minutes to go. And that fish took it. And I did like the sideways hook set and I just pulled that fish into the boat so fast, put it down, took a picture, and time was done, and I got it in. And, but then the next day I went to that same spot and the temperature had dropped. The water had dropped. It was 53 degrees and I didn't understand it enough then to process it. I think I do better now, but then I probably should have drug some sort of creature bait around or something. They were very sluggish because the water dropped 20 degrees in 2 days.
Yeah.
So, but the minute it got to 57.3 in the afternoon, the bite would turned on. It's like something around 57 or 58. But no one else was doing that in any kind of thing like I was doing it. But I put that worked. So I've learned like sometimes just if you can figure out a couple things and start applying it to that situation that you're in and do something unconventional, then you got some good chances there. But
Yeah. And, you use the word confidence. And in fly fishing, we all have a confidence fly.
mhm.
I tie probably 100 patterns. I fish 5 of them
Yeah,
because those are the ones I catch fish with. And
yeah,
so, whether you want to, whether it's your slump buster, whatever you call it,
yeah,
there's those things that we know how to fish and we know are going to work. But
yeah.
I can fish next to my best friend and he can be fishing a totally different fly, but it's his confidence fly. And we're both going to
Mhm,
have hookups because we both know how to fish those. We've fished those
mhm.
so much. We've become so confident with them. And one of the funniest things that I've done is I tie a dark green and black crawfish. And our crawfish here are orange because our rocks here
Yeah,
are orange and the
yeah,
water's clear.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'm going to tie these in orange. And I think I tied 30 of those things in orange and I gave them to everybody. I'm like, hey, we're going to kill them. I have yet to catch one on an orange one, but those green and black ones still
They like
work.
something
And
that sticks out.
yeah, and I think sometimes that's the difference. I think sometimes it's that oddball color. You know,
Uh-huh.
we talk a lot about blacks and olives and whites when we're talking about fly fishing,
Mhm.
but man, you just can't beat a fluorescent orange woolly bugger. It's amazing. You know, I mean, and it's so wild how just colors and being a little bit different, maybe being a size bigger or a size smaller.
Or something they haven't seen,
Yeah,
and
it's
that
wild.
and that happened on the Tournament of Champions on Eufaula on day 3. I forgot my battery completely at the Airbnb. And I'm sure that I am not very, I don't have a lot of experience fishing some of these brush piles like I was, and I was basically fishing by braille trying to find them because I didn't have any of my navionics with me. Um, but I threw stuff probably that nobody ever sticks on a hook over there and throws out there, and
Hmm.
I had the top limit of that, and be interested to see if it works next time I go fish there. But
Yeah,
um, I think that when you're doing something that's just what you feel confident in, or it's something that isn't normally thrown there, I think it helps because if everybody goes, you have to throw a white spinner bait, or you have to
yeah,
throw a white swim jig, or you have to, well, you know, sometimes throwing hot pink,
yeah,
and what's interesting is like that you have to understand it's not necessarily, especially if it's a deep water, pink underwater isn't necessarily pink.
you're right.
I know up here in Utah, fish like pink Ned rigs, pink TRDs and stuff, really deep. And the pink isn't going to look pink underwater. It actually looks more like a silver, or so it imitates a bait fish a little. Maybe the hue's off just a little bit,
Hmm.
but it's definitely something different. But I totally agree with that don't be afraid to try something completely different. It doesn't. There's no written rule, and just because everybody says that's how you fish that lake, well, guess what?
Yeah.
You
There's
can
a
fish it any way you want.
there's a trout color combination called an electric chicken, and it's hot pink and chartreuse.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, if
Yeah.
you're looking at this in black and white, it's going to be the same color, but with fish seeing color and underwater, they're both going to be very different than what they are.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, and then you have a fire tiger, I think, and it's a fluorescent orange and a fluorescent green, and they work really well.
Hmm.
But it's sort of one of those where if everybody's throwing those, it's not going to happen.
Hmm.
And so that's always an interesting point with it. I have a couple of things I want to get to, but let's circle back around to the going to different lakes. I'm sure, and I don't know personally who lives where, but I'm sure that there are guys on the trail or gals on the trail that have, a lake that they live by that's on the trail. And we call those folks local sticks.
Yeah.
That's what we call them around here. And
Yeah.
so a guy I used to work with, James Goodpasture, really nice guy. He's a local stick. He can go down to WAP down here and he can clean up. And then when he goes to another tournament, and he's won plenty of tournaments and everything. I mean, he could probably quit his job and do this, but um, he'll complain about local sticks. Well, those local sticks know everything, and I'm like, well, you're a local stick over here, and he's like, well, yeah, but what is it like to compete against somebody that is quote unquote a local stick? They know that place like the back of their hand. How does that factor into? Do you see people get overconfident? Do you
Yes.
see people get just not put up the numbers because they're not going into it fresh? How does your mind work with that, having fished so many of these areas already?
I definitely have seen that in tournaments where people are favored as someone that's going to win that tournament because it's their home lake. They do a bunch of fishing on that. And I've seen a lot of people that's not how it ends up. And I don't know if some of it's nerves, like they put pressure on themselves because it is their home lake, that they feel this intense pressure that they're supposed to be on top or what have you, or that you get so ingrained again in how something should fish and everything's so agile that you combine that with the pressure in a tournament. Maybe you aren't, when you go to some place that you've gone a bunch of times and caught fish and the fish aren't biting, it's really hard to make yourself leave. And that has been the hardest thing for me to learn this year is, when is it time to leave where I am and go somewhere else and try something different? And if you've spent time on a lake and you've got a honey hole that catches a ton of bass all the time and they're just not biting, you'll sit there. It's the urge to
Mhm.
sit there and wait because you're just sure that they're going to show up. And I think a lot of people waste a lot of time in that, waiting for that bass that they know just has to be there and just isn't biting, and I'm going to get them to bite. Well, maybe it's changed, and so it's easy to box yourself into that thinking and wait. And I've made that mistake on lots of lakes that I don't even know, just because in pre-fishing I caught some fish there and it's like, they've got to be here.
Right.
Well,
No,
they could be anywhere. They could be 20 feet the other way. I'm totally missing them.
right.
But but it's but it is always that, I think for a lot of tournament anglers, it's like, okay, I'm 2 hours in to the tournament. I haven't caught anything yet. Do I sit here? How much longer am I going to sit here? Or am I going to move? And if I'm going to move, what is my strategy now that I have to, what am I going to change up? Am I going to come back here? Like that thing on Dardanelle, I told you the temperature dropped and I didn't understand it. I couldn't wrap it around my head on day two as to why that bite hadn't turned on me. I knew it was because of the temperature. But for the life of me, I was just stuck in like, I have to frog this to get the bites because I couldn't get them any other way. And I didn't understand that I probably could have switched to a different technique maybe and got those bites. But what I did do in some ways was smart, as I thought, well, it's going to be warmer in the afternoon and I know what temperature it was when I got bites before. And I'm out. I can't just go back to a ramp and pack up and leave because it's going to take me an hour and a half. So
Right.
I'm going to go, basically junk fish and try and scrounge up some bass that I'd caught and pre-fish and see if they're there. So I just covered a lot of water until I got to a point where it's like, okay, now I only have 4 hours left. I'm going to go back to that place and cross my fingers that it's warmed up, and it had. But not not enough at the end. I lost some fish at the end that would
Yeah.
have helped. But that
Technique
helped me
one.
learn in there to not be afraid to to leave, when it's not working, and that helped me in Lake Champlain on day two. I was going into that after day one. I think I was like in 10th place or something like that. I had a good shot at making the money. And I went out in the rollers on day two to the spot that was going to fish first before it got really, really bad. Because I had a spot I could fish when it got really bad that was dependent on it being really bad. But when I was out there, I was like, I wasn't getting a bite at all. And after an hour, I'm like, nope, done. We're gonna pack it up and get out of here and go to the next one. And it's being able to be confident in your decisions. Then you're gonna live and die by your decisions. You
Yeah.
just try and make the best one you have, but you have to have that confidence. And definitely, I think that's a big struggle for a lot of people that are used to something on a certain lake being a certain way. Is you get stuck in that they have to be here, and not be willing to pull up that anchor and and get out and do something different. And it's because it's a gamble. You're giving up what you know could be for a completely unknown something,
Right.
and it could make it or break it for you.
And I don't want you to. I really I don't want to hear you say, Darnell, that you could have done better, because we all know you sacrificed that so Nick could win.
That is true. I
Yeah,
did.
I mean, Nick really needs to be appreciative because you just went ahead and you said, "I'm gonna be humble. I'm gonna let this
Yeah.
funny looking guy win," you know?
Yeah. Chachi really needs to cut a check,
He does, he does.
and my time will come someday.
But, and this is the funny thing, I have with, Nick and, with my buddy Todd, they're the guys that on an 8-hour float, every lure will be wet. They're the guys that constantly change lures. And
Yeah.
I was always taught, "Oh, be patient, you'll get it." And so I fall back into this idea of, well, I'm gonna throw it and I'll move around and, we're river fishing and, I'll get fish, it's I'll catch fish, but I won't be putting up the numbers that they are. And I think that there is something about changing that
Mhm.
even I've talked to, even just colors, just going from a dark color to a light color, or you hear if it's sunny outside, use a light color. If it's cloudy, use a dark color.
Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like uh, sometimes you just have to change. And I think knowing a fishery sometimes is a disadvantage.
Mhm.
Um, we were down. It was and this is a funny story. I think you'll get a kick out of it. We were down in Louisiana and I was fishing and I ran into Nick. He was with us and he and I pulled up against a little, I don't know, it's weeds growing out, a little bit of mud on top of it, like a gator slide, where the alligators sun themselves down there in the marsh. And, I get out a beer and I toss him a beer and I get me a beer and our other buddy comes up and I said, "Have you had any luck?" And he goes, "Yeah, I've been using these little grubs." I'm like, "Do you have one?" He's like, "Yeah." So he gave me one that was all eaten up because
Yeah.
he's that kind of a friend. And I cast it out there and we're sitting here drinking, talking about the fish we've got. And next thing you know, I'm got a sheep's head. Nick had lived there for 3 years and never caught a sheep's head. And it was the weirdest thing. And it was just, we were sitting there having a beer talking about where we were going next. And I just cast it out
Yeah.
for no reason other than just have one in the water. And sometimes sometimes that
Mhm.
happens. And
Yeah.
it blows me away how fishing can be, you're a local stick, you know what's going on, you're great there, versus you're a local stick, you know what's going on, and you overconfidence and you're reluctant to change.
Mhm.
And I've thought, how many times if I changed a fly would I have gotten more smallies out of the river? But every guess, like you're saying, and we're not doing it for money. I mean, I can only imagine the pressure with money.
Yeah, um it's just a constant. Especially kayaks, because when you commit to go paddle across something for miles, you're in it. You can't just pack up and hit the throttle and just
Yeah.
gun down the lake. You're looking at something that is a usually an hour or two commitment. Some people, now I'm not this kind of person, but I do know people who will change two or three boat ramps.
Yeah.
They'll go fish. They'll go fish a little bit, get a fish here, get a fish there. They'll go pull out, go to a whole different boat ramp, get a couple other fish, go get on another boat ramp, catch another fish. I don't do that because I just think that's a lot of extra work and driving, and I'd rather just figure out and change around where I'm at. But
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
but
my
you
local.
gotta. The only way you're gonna catch them is your line has to be in the water,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so even if you're just frustrated as heck, trying different things pays off. When I was on the Mississippi River on day one, we had a huge storm the night before, just thunder and lightning, and it blew all my spots out. The
Yeah.
river came up 2 feet on the Mississippi River, and man, I had just some beautiful spots. I had my power pole, and I would power pull down, and I was catching massive smallies all over the place. And I had like three or four just amazing spots. I was like so stoked for it, and I went down
Hmm.
to those areas, and it was all blown out. The current was a lot heavier. There was zero visibility, which is not great for smallmouth fishing at all.
Right.
And I covered miles. I went down river, I went up river, and I just kept casting. And finally, in like the last couple hours, I went out and there was like uh, a boat ramp, a boat ramp that came down, and there was some riprap rock and a little vegetation, and the river had come up and was going over the edge of that over the boat ramp. And I started throwing swim baits off that little rocks down along that boat ramp, and I caught a limit,
Yeah.
literally where people were. So I'd be fishing, I catch a fish and sort of drift off, and some guy'd come and take his boat out, and then I'd have to wait like 10 minutes before, because he's like gunning his engine
Oh
right
yeah.
where I was catching all those fish. I gotta wait like 10 minutes, and sure enough, there'd be another fish there after about 10 minutes, and um, but I mean, that was just the weirdest place. They were literally stacked up in a place about the size of a small car on a boat ramp.
Hmm.
And, go figure.
It's wild. And you talk about the river blowing out, and we just talked about that flooding a little bit before. It's amazing with the rivers. A lot of the rivers, they'll blow out for 4 or 5 hours,
Hmm.
and then they'll drop back down. We were out camping one night, and rain came up, and two guys left because the river was going to be blown out. We
Yeah.
got up the next morning, the river was fine.
Yeah.
But I have to say this very carefully because I get a lot of hate sometimes when I say it. I bow fish for the big head carp, the invasive carp on the Mississippi
Oh, yeah. They
River.
do that a lot here in
Yeah.
Utah because it's
Yeah. And
actually the state will pay people, you
yeah,
know.
they're not paying us yet, but Lord, if they ever do, I'm quitting my job. Um, But I don't bow fish for gar, I don't bow fish for buffalo, I don't bow fish for drum, I don't bow fish for any of our native carp
Yeah.
species, but that big head carp, and I'm talking about the one that when you're running a boat motor, it jumps.
Oh, the Asian
Those
carp.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we can't call them that anymore. We'll get
Okay.
canceled. We have to call them the big head carp.
The
You
big
can't you can't
carps.
call them those anymore. It's not PC, which,
All
we don't
right.
care anyway.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
evidently
apologize.
I was making jokes with my buddy the other day. He's like, "You can't say that." I'm like, "Why not? That's what we've called them for 20 years."
Yeah.
But it's July, the hottest, the lowest of the river's going to be. We made a plan 2 weeks out. We're going to clean up on these big head carp. We're helping the environment. We're going to drink beer. We're going to have a good day. And the night before, it hadn't rained here in probably 3 weeks. It rained somewhere up north, and that river was chocolate milk. Every tributary was
Oh.
chocolate milk. It was nasty and gross, and the only ones we saw were the ones that jumped into the boat.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's so hard when a body of water that doesn't clean out fast gets blown out, and then you've
Mhm.
gotta rely on so much more of sound
Mhm.
and working louder baits that are going to draw more attention, but those baits often are faster baits, and
Yep.
if it's cold, a fast bait just doesn't work. I mean, how do you think about all of this? I don't know, are scented baits legal in your tournaments?
Yeah, you can use scent
Does
and
that go
herbs
into it
and
when you
things
have a
like that.
situation like that, or are scented baits more common in that area?
Um, there's some. I mean, I'll scent certain things. I mean, I'll scent stuff like jigs or stuff I want a Ned rig or whatever. I usually don't scent anything that's a big moving bait.
Right. But I mean, when it's muddy out there, do you move more toward those scents? Is that a tactic?
No, I when it's really muddy, I tend to use spinner baits really slow, like collapsing on the
Oh,
ground
gotcha.
slow.
Just enough
Um,
vibration for them to feel
I use
then?
enough vibration, just knock them around, and um, I like to use stuff with underspins,
Mhm.
or I'll put like a tailspin into things. I give it just a little flash and dash to make it, because those underspins actually make a sound underwater. And I didn't know that. So I didn't know that some things made sounds underwater because I'm such a noob sometimes. But I put a GoPro in a tub just to like mess around with underspins, and I couldn't believe the sound they made underwater. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am throwing this all the time because
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, might as well just been like those U-boats that are sending out ping signals or whatever. I mean, I liked that sound a lot better than like chatterbaits. I
Mhm.
think I think it's a little different sound than most of the fish probably hear. I don't think a lot of people throw underspins, but I love throwing underspins, or I'll throw them even like on a flashy swimmer hook. So it's just underspin on an open hook that I'll put like a fluke or something on that I'm gonna just sort of pop around on
Right.
the bottom a little bit and let it sit and pop and spit. So I don't know. There's a lot of people who just swear by throwing chatterbaits, jackhammers, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I mean, I've thrown them and I've had some success with them, but I get bored.
Yeah, I think there's finesse fishermen and there's power fishermen.
Yes.
And again, I think that goes back to confidence.
Yeah.
There's guys that'll dead drift a nymph for, 30 or 40 yards. And there's guys like me that's just cranking streamers, stripping as
Hmm.
hard as I can and looking for that reaction.
Yep.
And I think there's a big difference, which is really odd because when I use a rod and reel, I actually finesse fish. When I use a fly rod, that's where I'm going
Yep.
maniac. Which whatever for whatever it's worth. But talking about tournament fishing, and I know we sort of talked about this or we hinted around at this last week. Man, my time gets I talk to so many people, my time gets so weird. Um, do you recommend having been, going right into the big show as you
Mhm.
did? Do you recommend that people start off with local tournaments and do you see a lot of folks like Nick who's fished a lot of local tournaments that come up? Or do you think it's, hey, if you want to do it, just jump into it?
I think most people will want to start with a local tournament. I think it's a confidence builder. It's so intimidating when you're just starting out because it's like, how number one, it's like, okay, what is this tournament about? How do I measure the fish? How do I do all these different things that happen in a tournament? How do I handle all these different rules? There's sort of a learning curve on just how to do a tournament itself. And especially if you've never done them and you've been, a great angler and you're used to just catching fish, it can really shake you up to go to a tournament and completely blank. And
Yeah.
so I think most people would opt for a local tournament. I think it just lets you get your feet wet and sort of allows you some of those mistakes. We all make mistakes in the beginning of, you know, like even for especially for kayak fishing, the thing with fish jumping off your board. That is, you finally get a fish and you got it on this measurement board that you got to measure, and
Do
it
you take
takes a
the hook
while.
out? Do you take the hook out
You
before you put
have
them on
to
the board?
you have to take everything out, and then you got to put it on the board, and it's got to have its mouth closed, and you got to have your hands can be only in certain places, and then you got to take a picture of it, and for a lot of people, that's a lot of things that got to come together perfectly to work, and the fish is not cooperating
Yeah.
whatsoever, especially if it's a
I don't take the hook out till I get the picture, you
smallmouth.
know, or
Yeah,
if
but
it's a
tournaments you
saltwater
can't have.
fish.
Yeah, you can't have anything
Yeah.
like any kind of hook. You can't have anything that tethers it or anything. And
Yeah.
so you'll often see like some of my fish pictures. That fish has blood, and it's just because it's my blood. Because I'm on the fourth or fifth try because the smallmouth has spined me every
Oh
single
yeah.
time, and every time I go to take a picture, it flies
Oh,
everywhere.
they explode.
So I think I think you can definitely jump right in, especially Hobie Bass Opensters. I mean, you could walk right in and do it, and having never done a tournament, and people have done that. But I think that is you got to be a pretty strong person mentally because I think it can crush you if you
Mhm.
aren't used to if you have a set of expectations about how you're going to perform. If you go in there knowing, for me, when I started out, my goal was just to do the tournaments and catch a fish. I
Yeah.
didn't have expectations of catching a limit or catching a limit on 2 days in a row or cashing checks or anything like that. I just wanted to catch one fish. And and I had tournaments where I didn't catch a fish at all, and that's really hard to deal with because you feel this sort of peer pressure about it or this performance pressure. But for new people, that's why I say local tournaments. They're entry wise as far as fees, um, aren't going to cost you an arm and a leg. If it's
Yeah.
local,
And
it
you're
might
not
be something you can
driving.
travel to from your house. You're not having to pay for staying somewhere, and that can also be daunting if you're new and you want to go to these tournaments. I mean, there's costs with finding lodging, and if you're by yourself and you don't know anyone, I mean, you might be footing that cost by yourself, and there's all kinds of things to take into consideration of that. So I just think it's easier on the psyche to start a little bit in some local clubs and just
Yeah.
get your feet wet and see if you really like it. And if
Yeah.
if if you think like, wow, I could really do this, then go for it. There's nothing holding you back. There's nothing that says you have to do a bunch of local clubs or whatever. But I mean, people have, jobs in life and kids and PTO, and
Yeah.
you can only stretch it so far and financially stretch it so far.
Yeah. And I've seen a lot of guys that, were, in bass tournaments that were the back of the boat guy. There were tournaments that
The
you had a front
co-angler.
of the boat guy and you had a back of the boat guy, and the back of the boat guy did pretty good, but he wasn't making any decisions.
Yep.
And then when he decided to get his own boat and go out, he wasn't performing where he had been as the back of the boat guy.
Yeah.
And I've seen guys that, are really great and they can take you to a lake and they can put you on fish, but man, you go to a different lake and
Mhm.
it's the blind leading the blind. And so, I've always wondered about that sometimes, as to where you get to where you rely so much on what you know, and then going to an unfamiliar lake sort of changes everything. And it's like I go to my little local lake and I know where the fish are. I know where every brush pile is. I've fished it for years.
But
I
there's
can,
things you can build on, and
yeah,
so like as an example, so you're talking about Dardanelle and sort of frogging and dealing with some of the the vegetation that I saw there. Well, the next tournament I went to was on Sam Rayburn, and Sam Rayburn had a historic level flood. It was like 12 feet above flood level. I was literally fishing over, people's backyards and playground sets
yeah,
and whatever else was on the, it was just
yeah,
your launch. People were launching from the street because
yeah,
the entire marina was underwater. Um, so when I was fishing there, I learned how to fish over flooded maple trees that were, I was fishing over flooded trees, and I learned some things there that when I went to Lake Champlain, it's like, okay, when I went to Lake Champlain, I saw this vegetation that reminded me of Dardanelle. And I had tried some things at Sam Rayburn that I'd never done before. And I basically took that bait that I was trying at Sam Rayburn and I sort of reverse rigged it a little bit and threw it into the vegetation that reminded me of Dardanelle, and I did really well. It was
yeah,
just something that on the fly, that it was like those two tournaments, weird things that I learned merged together to help me catch bass, on this
yeah,
weird technique out in the, out in open water. But I mean, all that stuff builds off each other. So you see stuff like, okay, I'm taking a fishery from Arkansas, combining it with Texas, and applying it in New York.
yeah.
So you know,
And,
and so
and
you build
that's,
off each other on that. You see these similarities, and it's just you take that knowledge and you keep working it.
and that's stuff you're never going to learn if you fish the exact same lake in the
Hmm.
exact same spot in relatively protected water conditions that don't change much.
Hmm.
That's the things that you can't tell somebody. Those are the fishing techniques that you can't say, okay, we're going to go here and we're going to fish for this and this is how we're going to do it, and expect the exact same results every time, because
Mhm.
everything's going to be a little bit different. I can't fish one river, go to another river and fish it exactly the same and get the exact same results. And I think that's sort of what your experience is showing you. And I think that's really cool that you're able to take those and blend them together.
And the hard part is, the hard part is, like I said, is when you get in a rut, when you're like, this should work. This should be working. Why isn't it working? You know, it's funny. I'm way better at adjusting in on the water and adjusting to conditions and adjusting to just the curveballs that come along and being able to drop things and let them go and do something different. I'm way better at doing in the water than my real life, outside the water. Like, if I could just apply all this like flexibility and mental agility to like the rest of my life right now, that would be so awesome. But
You and me both.
that's but it's funny. But I mean, that's just what it takes, I think. And honestly, I do believe that there's also just luck.
Yeah.
There's
You know,
just luck.
I'm gonna ask you a question I've never asked any other guest, and this
All
is
right.
because
Uh-oh.
if anybody's gonna answer it, I think you will, because I think I really I get a feel from you a lot that you have just you're sort of like me in this way. When I was shooting competition handgun, there was a book, and I think it was called something like, it wasn't the 10 rings, but it was like the 7 swords or something, and it talked about finding your zen like moment, being calm, being
Mhm.
reflective, not taking anything in that wasn't needed.
Mhm.
And I found that when I would just take a few minutes and relax before I went up to shoot a stage, I did much better. And I've noticed whenever I'm fishing, especially in a kayak on a river on moving water, if I'm having a really bad time, I just take a few minutes and I just stop and I just look and I look at the water and I calm down and I quit worrying that, you know, Todd's 4 fish ahead of me or Grant's got a
Mhm.
16-inch smallie. I stop, because we're not doing it for money, but we're doing it for fun and bragging rights. And who has to buy the first round of beer, you know? And I think I have those moments where I just relax and things just sort of come back in. I sort to rely on what I've learned. Have you ever experienced like where you just shut down and we're just going to do this and this is what we're going to do? Does that ever come
I would
in?
say that's a lot of my fishing, actually. I don't. I sort of do my own thing. Like I said, I'm the person that's out there playing music and singing, and doing stuff that you don't do in tournaments. Eating. If I get stressed out, I'll stop. But I just find if I just let go and just try and be as present in the moment as I can and just focus on that one cast. I don't, that other cast I had, that's done.
Yeah.
I don't think about it. I don't really look at the leaderboard very often. Occasionally I might, but most of the time I don't look at it and I don't care where anybody else is. I'm just trying to be in the present where I am. And it's amazing when you're relaxed and just paying attention to the moment. You pick up things that I think you would normally not notice. You'll pick up a swirl of a fish or sound of something, or one little leaf that's moving that's in the water.
Yep.
You pick up things I think you normally, if you're hurrying in your mind and you're way ahead of yourself, that you miss on that. And um yeah, I would say a lot. I fish, we talked about tools and electronics and everything. But I really fish by instinct, and I fish by where where my instinct tells me to go, and I do a lot of just I don't know. I talk to God a lot.
Yeah.
I have like ongoing. I'm a chatty person on the water. I have some ongoing conversations, and it's funny because I feel like sometimes I'm like in like a weird story. Like when
Mhm.
I was on the TLC, it's like on the last day. I mean, I had no electronics. I'm fishing deep uh, brush piles that I can't see unless I run into them. And I got my limit. I'm trying to upgrade. And one of the guys that was a lot higher in the standings than me was coming along, and I said, "You just tell me where you want to fish. You can have wherever you want to fish because you're probably going to cash a check. I'm not
Yeah.
going to like take your fish away from you because there's no way I'm cashing a check because I sucked really bad yesterday." So I said, "You just tell me where you're going to fish and where you would like me to fish." And he's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I'm just going to do it." So he went fished here and he kept going, and I said, "Well, I can go over there." And he goes, "Yeah." Because he's like already fished it. And I was like, okay, God, like, got 15 minutes left and I need to upgrade.
Yeah.
So I'm going to fish this pier right here and we're just going to make it happen. And I'm singing a song and boom, I got like, with like 10 minutes to go, I got a big old upgrade right in the same place that guy had been fishing and buzzed right through. And it's like I felt like that was going to happen. I felt like, okay, this is how this story is going to play out.
Yeah.
And I just feel so much in the moment sometimes that it happens like that there's just, I don't know, there's some overarching script, and I'm just like, I'm along for the ride and I'm just trying to enjoy the moment, and
Yeah.
whatever's going to be is going to be. And so I don't ever get upset about it. I'll feel upset about sometimes what fish I lose because it's so ridiculous how I lose them. I had a tournament where I actually lost my net and I didn't even notice I lost my net. I went to go catch a fish and went to get my net, and it's like, how have I been running around here? Where'd my net even go?
Mhm.
And I finally looked on the film later, and I've been like running around for 2 hours without even realizing my net was gone. But
Y
as I had this moment where it's like, again, a few minutes left, and I cast a swim bait up under a dock and let it sink, and I saw the line just start going. I'm like, oh, there's something's got it, and I
Yeah.
hit that, set that hook, and it was a big, big old spotted bass. And I don't know if you know anything about spotted bass, but they do not behave
Yeah.
whatsoever, and they're entirely unpredictable. And they're like largemouth meets smallmouth meat, really bad attitude. and and I just remember in slow motion, I got that fish right up to the boat, and I'm like, I've got this 8-pound leader. There's no way I'm boat flipping this big fish. So I look at this spot, and it's like in slow motion. I see my hand reaching for it, and it's like I have eye contact with that fish, and like everything slows down, and I see the fish like watching my hand and go, nope, and just jump straight out of the water and throw my hook.
Yeah.
And it's just stuff like that where it's just you're just in sort of this storyline, and you can't get really upset about it, because if you let it get to you, that's what makes you second guess yourself and doubt yourself. And it's just going to be however it's going to be. And sometimes you are really lucky and you win. And it's
Yeah. And I'll say this, we went on a family vacation. I didn't get to the ocean until I was quite a bit older in life, and, went and bought all this crap that I didn't need, and, was, paid I don't know how much for a license down in Florida, and gonna catch fish, I'm gonna catch fish, and I caught a couple of hardtail bait, what you cut up for bait. That was all I caught, and the next year we got this big group together and we're going to Louisiana, and it's okay. Well, I'm spending X amount of money for the Airbnb with my friends, and I'm spending X amount of money on the license, and I'm spending X amount of money on this and X amount of money on that. And by golly, I'm going to catch my limit of redfish each day, and I'm going to eat redfish at night, and we're going to have it's going to be great. And I had all this pressure on me, and I had caught like three, in 4 days. I mean, it
Yeah.
was but I noticed I had all this pressure on me, and the next time we went back, I'm like, I'm going because I'm gonna see my friends, because I hadn't seen Nick in, like, 2 years. Like, I'm gonna go back because I just wanna hang out.
Yeah.
And my fishing was incredible.
Yeah.
And I'd slowed down. I had just been happy with where I was. I was happy with looking at the scenery. I was happy with just, "Oh, hey, there's an alligator. Okay, let's paddle away from there." You know, and I had more fun, and I caught more fish, and I'm sitting here scratching my head going, "Okay." So every time I go down there now, my wife's like, "Are you gonna bring back some fish? Because when you get night you get back, we'll go ahead and we'll fix some because you catch them, that the last bit of the fish will catch them morning. You'll drive 8 hours back, and you can have a meal that night or the next day."
Mhm.
And I'm like, I don't know if I'll catch any fish or not. My wife's
Yeah.
like, "Well, why are you going down there?" I said, "Well, I'm going for the experience now."
Yep.
And I noticed that on the White River, going out to the White, and expecting to get, you know, 20 plus inch, 25 plus inch browns,
Mhm.
and psych myself out. And I'm like, that's not how I can do it. And so, I love the folks that have confidence and do that, but I really feel like what you're saying is really what a lot of us need to look at more is enjoy where you're at,
Mhm.
look at what's going on, and just live in that moment. Don't think about the one that just got off the hook because there's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a great lesson that any fisher person needs to learn. And
Mhm.
Kat, can you believe it's been an hour?
No.
Yeah. We're we're just under 57 minutes. Go ahead and plug
Oh,
all your social medias for everybody so they can follow you, especially as the tour fires back up next year.
well, Kate Fishing on YouTube, same on Facebook, and then Catherine underscore Field. But you can probably find me on Kate Fishing on Instagram too. But that's what I am. I've started a website, but it's still sort of in progress. KateFishing.com, where I try and put my podcasts and videos and my schedule, and eventually I want to sell some of these hats. Because people have told me that they want these hats, and I'm like, why? But I thought, this would be cool. If somebody really wants them, then I'll sell them and just give the money to charity. And
Yeah.
and I really want to just do something to help young girls that are getting through tough
Yeah.
situations. And so maybe that'll be something for the positive that I can do. But
Yeah.
um,
I
yeah,
know.
and I just want to give a shout out to my sponsors. It's Hobie Fishing and Dobbins does all my rods, and OmniaFishing.com is a good sponsor for me, and they supply everything online tackle wise because I'm on the road. So I'll tell them I'll be at a hotel in 4 days at some address, and they'll ship it to the hotel. And I got my, because I do
Yeah.
carry like my own little tackle store with me, but I got to replenish, and with COVID and everything, you never know what you're going to find down the road. So
Tell me about it.
if get it delivered is a little easier on you. So do that, and then stealth fishing rods holders. They do my rod holders for my boat. So
I
no,
just saw those guys on Instagram for the first time.
really, they're awesome.
I may hit them up to come on the podcast because it looks like
Oh,
they've got
they
some
do it.
pretty neat stuff.
Yeah, I really like their rod holders, and um, especially, I mean, they're super strong, and you basically just set it right in it, and it's like just basically a quick release pull to get it out of there. You don't have to mess with unhooking anything or that. So
Yeah,
um,
I'll
um,
definitely gotta talk to them.
I
Nick
really like
wants
their rod holders.
Nick told me I had to get business cards and stickers by the first tournament next year.
Yeah. Well, that's a good idea. I
Yeah.
think he should have told me that too.
Well, he said he was going to give out my business card for people that want to come on the show, and then he was
Yeah.
going to give out stickers. So I'll make sure that
Yeah.
you get a couple of stickers for your
Yeah,
kayak
that'd
if
be
you want
great.
them.
Well, I would like to put them on my kayak and my trailer. So you better give
Yeah,
me three, one for
I'll,
each side of my trailer. So,
I'll send you a dozen of them you can give away too.
all right, that
You,
sounds
you,
good.
you can go around and look important because you know me.
Oh my gosh. Well, you're looking to the wrong person to look important. This is
I
not
didn't say you were important. I said I was important.
okay. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. They'll be like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, she knows somebody
I'm
important.
gonna ride your coattails for a while now, Sean.
That's, you know what? Everybody else
Yeah.
does. That's how
Yours yours
Nick
and
won Darnell. Yeah.
Chachi's.
Yeah. That's how he won Darnell, was riding my coattails. I taught him everything he knows.
Yeah, that's what he told me.
Yeah. I know. It's amazing. I've got to get the two of you on here together
That would be fun.
and
That
just
would
let you
be
two talk smack. I won't even, I'll introduce the show and then
I'm
I'm
a
just going to sit back
terrible
and
smack
laugh.
talker.
Oh, yeah, you can smack talk him. He's so tiny. You can put him in your pocket.
I know. I know.
Well,
Oh,
I
I
wanted to
love
wish you a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you too, and thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you, not just once, but twice,
Well,
because
anytime you want to,
I am a chatty Cathy,
you're
obviously.
you obviously are, but you are obviously also on my speed dial. So
All right,
anytime you
all
want
right,
to
I
come on,
appreciate it.
anytime something exciting happens, or even if you have a good day just out fishing locally and you want to come on and talk about it, because I know everybody likes to hear it.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Sean.
No problem.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. And guys, we're not going to take any time off. We'll be right back after Christmas. In case you didn't get the hackle you want, you can find out where to get some because we're going to have Grumpy Platypus on. Guys, thanks again for listening to Kayak Flyer.
Bye bye.